I'm delighted to say Matt Williams is with us to help preview Leinster, Munster and potentially the end of Munster's season. They can obviously extend their season for a week if they win this game. Matt, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
G'day, Jeff. Lovely to talk to you, mate. Very, very well.
I thought your piece last week where you pointed out that it's hatred that drives the great rivalries was never more relevant than this week. And to be honest, I'm a lone voice here, but I actually think Munster are going to win this game on the basis of your piece that the hatred they feel is welling up so strong inside them. Whereas for Leinster, it's like, okay, we've got this domestic issue here, but actually we've got our eyes on a massive European prize down the road. I think Munster are a buzzsaw and Leinster are walking straight into it.
Jer, I'm not with you on that one completely. I think it's very close, and I think Munster have closed the gap. Again, because of this incredible rivalry and and actually what I said was a hatred of losing. Both sides just detest the feeling of being beaten by the other, and the humility and the humble pie you've got to quaff down when that occurs. And for the best part of a decade, it's been Munster that have been doing the humble pie eating, and that's just sticking with them so bad. I think the shutdowns really helped Munster. I think their three coaches here, we've got Roundtree and Bernie Larkham and obviously Coach Van Grand there. It's given them more time with the players. They've got a lot of time away from playing. They're much more organised. And so the gap has been bridged. Whether it's and we saw that the other day. That was for two teams that have been away from rugby for the best part of 6 months. That was a cracking game of rugby. The quality was high. But Leinster, as they have done all year, were just too good. Now, I think it's a lot's going to depend on the fitness of the Munster players, how they bounce up. They're going to all play 3 in a row, where the Leinster players didn't play last week. I think 1 or 2 of them might back up. I don't think many of them, most of them will come from that Munster game and they'll be fresh. So I'd still back Leinster, but the gap is getting smaller and smaller, which is wonderful for Irish rugby, and full credit to the Munster guys. But I think when the champions are still there and they've still got their hand on it, they're going to be hard to throw.
It feels that there's almost like a rematch element to this, Matt, given the last game was so recent. What areas did Munster target when it came to Leinster a couple of weeks ago that they can retarget, and if they do so effectively, they can perhaps find a serious edge in this game?
Well, I think the old story remains true. Forwards win the games and backs score the points. And the Munster forwards disrupted Leinster probably like I haven't seen for a long time, especially in the line-out. And, that's where Dev Toner, I think, will come back into that Leinster side. Dev had a very good game the following week against Ulster, and I think he's a master of the line-out. He's a great defensive caller of the line-out. I think he'll come back into that. And obviously the injury to Snyman is just so heartbreaking for everyone, for the player, for the whole competition. He's a phenomenal athlete, and to be robbed of him in the first game is unspeakably bad luck for the organisation and the man himself. But I think Leinster will have an advantage there, and Munster will have to step up in that. Conor Murray box kicking, it's just so hard to handle. It's boring. I hate it. But I've got to say it's a very effective tactic. And perhaps, Lama didn't have his best game. Whether we see Lama go to the wing and Robbie Kearney comes back for one of his last games, that might occur. I think it's a long shot. I think one bad game doesn't take Lama out. But right across, like where Munster have improved, if you pick the combined team, most of the team, 75 to 80%, would be Leinster. And that's the difference that Munster just can't get past. They're making semi-finals of all these competitions, but they just can't get past these really big sides like Saracens before their relegation and Leinster. And I just can't see their forwards matching the Leinster forwards for the whole 80 minutes, especially off the bench as well. I think Leinster will have a stronger bench, so that will be interesting. Rhys Ruddock I expect to be on the bench. Whether Furlong comes through or not, we still don't know. But that's going to be a very strong Leinster bench as well. And I just don't think Munster have got the quality there with the injuries that they're facing.
Just on that point you made about Jordan Larmour there, Matt, from those few moments of I don't know what it was, maybe sloppiness with your first game back in a few months. From those moments of sloppiness against Munster, especially high in the air, is there any start of an air of concern from you about that at all? Because, like, to me, if Rob Kearney is being linked with the 15 jersey this weekend, it's pretty much a statement that Leinster needed to bolster their options in the air and perhaps weren't overly happy with his performance 2 weeks ago.
I don't think anyone, especially Jordan, would be happy with his performance. But we have to go back and say he has played exceptionally well for a very long period of time. And we all have bad games. We all have bad games. Even the greatest have bad games. He had a bad day at the office. And that bad day was he didn't handle the kicks well. And you've got to say that the Munster, the kicking was spot on and he didn't come up with it that day. Now, he'll go away and work at it. He's handled the kicks well in the past, so I wouldn't be overly concerned with it. But I think the fact that there's a few injuries on the Leinster wing could open the opportunity for Rob to come back. I don't think that's a high probability. I think it's a possibility. If I know Leo, he will stick with Jordan and show faith in him. And Leo's got his selections absolutely spot on for a couple of years now. You know, when he picks a completely different side that goes out against Ulster, and you look through that side and the youthfulness and the inexperience of that Leinster side going up against an Ulster side that had performed very, very well through the season pre-COVID. And yet they come out and they play this wonderful brand of rugby and win brilliantly. So you've got to say that Leo knows what he's doing. It was unfortunate for Jordan, but that's, as I said, one game. If he does it 4 games in a row, yeah, okay, we've got a problem. But one game is a motivation for him rather than anything else.
I suppose you want to make sure that you have him back firing for the rest of the season as well. And when do you give him that opportunity? In a quarter-final against Saracens, you can't really do that. So it's either this week and you hope that you win, or it's next week in the final. And these decisions do become very high wire at this stage of the season.
They do, Ger, and you know, again, I try not to be biased. You know, Leo is a guy I coached. I have great respect for him as a person. I regard him as a friend. But I have to say, just putting all that aside, I've looked at some of his decisions, selection decisions, and I've gone, wow, that's a big call. And I'll take you back to the pool games against Northampton, where he selected a side to go away to Franklin Gardens and left out Furlong, left out so many big names. And I went, gee, you know, that's a huge call. The team come out and perform and smash Northampton away at Franklin Gardens. He then makes 7 or 8 changes, maybe more, I think it was, including the bench, might have been 9 changes to come back to the Abuva. And those guys come out and perform for him. So he's really got that ability to drop someone, for want of a better term, or not select them, but bring them back a week later and they're motivated and they'll play for him because they know the competition within the group is so high. And so there's 2 parts to that. The Leinster players, when they're not selected, aren't putting their tail between their legs, taking their bat and ball and going home. They're responding as a coach wants. They're saying, well, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to fight for my position when I get a chance. And Leo, as a very smart coach, is giving those players a second chance. They might have to wait a week or 2 weeks, but he's doing it. So I don't expect him to do anything that would take away from Jordan Lama's confidence, because the kid, he's not a kid anymore, he's a man. He's playing really good rugby. He's developed into a high-quality fullback that had a bad day. So I think the way Leo manages his selection of Jordan will bring out the best in him, if it's this week or the week after, whenever he gets his next opportunity.
There's no sense, though, that he's actually just a better winger than a fullback. Is that a possibility, particularly when the debate is now open at Ireland level and Stockdale is starting to play well at fullback too?
Yeah, it's a nice problem to have, isn't it? It's a really nice problem to have. Again, I'm open to the discussion, and I always love you have pick 3 fullbacks on the wing. New Zealand have been doing it for years. With Ben Smith was fullback for his province, but played most of his rugby on the wing for New Zealand. I take you back to the great David Campuzzi, who was fullback, left, right and centre, but on the wing for Australia. And Bobby Edgerton, was on the wing in the 91 World Cup, had 150 first-grade games in Sydney as a fullback. So I've got no problems with having 3 fullbacks in that position for Ireland. But I would, in Lama's defence, he's been really good. at the beginning of his time at fullback, he was out, and I said he was out. He needed time. He was about a metre out of position, and a fullback that can make you look 100 metres out. But he has got a lot better. I think Robbie Kearney's mentored him. Full credit to Robbie, his generosity in the way he's teaching. He's passed his information on to a younger player. And I thought Jordan played very well last year. So he has got some runs on the board as a good fullback and being in position and doing the right thing. Last week wasn't good. If you come back and you play well again, all's forgiven. Let's move on. We all have bad days. But I think to write him off on one selection is wrong. I used to speak to some really great, wise men in the old days that were just selectors in the amateur days. And they would always say, you never make a selection on one game. You make a selection on 6 games. And if we balance out Jordan on his last 6 performances, he holds that position.
And look, the tyranny of now is obviously what we're talking about now. The most recent piece of evidence that we have is a couple of high balls that he got under and didn't compete for. But if you're Leo Cullen, you're thinking, what's next season like? What's the season after that like? Where does he flower as an international quality player, as somebody who has already been name-checked by the head coach of the Lions as somebody he wants to have in his team? So, look, I think you're right. They have to make that commitment to him. Can I ask you about Munster and what you've seen from Stephen Larkham? It's been such a weird period. Obviously, it was interrupted. He did get the opportunity to work with them. Like, what are the hallmarks of what we should expect down the road? And are you beginning to see any of that made evident just yet?
Oh, yeah, G. Yeah. Look, Stephen was a great player, not a good player, a great player, who unfortunately I coached against many times for the Waratahs in Scotland when he was playing for the Brumbies and for Australia. And Stephen was a great thinker, a sensational player, and did an exceptionally good job as a coach. And he's only a young coach, and I felt leaving Australia, leaving the Brumbies, would do him the world of good. Coming into Munster, into a different environment very supportive of him. As Irish rugby is of foreign coaches, I certainly can vouch for that. But he's a smart guy and he knows what he wants. I saw some great things happening at Munster in the way they were attacking last year, but the players needed time to evolve into it. When they played Racing at Thomond Park, where they just lost, they probably had created 3 or 4 other try-scoring opportunities through the systems that I could see Stephen was putting into place. But the players' individual errors cost them those tries. Now, as the players become more comfortable with the concepts that Stephen's bringing and where he's taking the team, which is a very different path for Munster from where they've been from the last 7 or 8 years, they'll move forward and they'll improve. The same's going to be said for Roundtree with the way he's taking his pack forward. But I think the biggest issue for Munster, which I haven't seen enough of this year, or since the resumption, to make a comment on, the biggest issue for Munster is their defence. When teams get in behind Munster, in other words, just get their nose through that front line, they tend to score tries pretty easily. And Munster's secondary defence for a number of years has been poor. And certainly that day, in that game that I was talking of at Thomond Park against Racing, it wasn't their offence that cost them, it was their defence. Racing got in behind them a number of times and it was just so easy to score a try. I think if we remember the little chips through which all resulted in tries. And that's Munster's big problem for me at the moment. And I think they will get better under Stephen Larkham. And I think Stephen Larkham will get better working with Munster. So I'm really looking forward to the coming season. We definitely haven't seen the best of that coaching group yet because they've only had such short time together. But the break will do them good. More than any other team in Ireland, I think the break will have done Munster good.
Who's responsible for secondary defence, Matt, and how do you fix that?
It's a good question. I don't really know who's in charge of that. I'll spin you back a few years to Racing as well. I think it was at Bordeaux in a semi-final, and the Munster boys hate me talking about it because I wrote them like a favourite out of Punchestown because it was poor. They didn't like it, but I just told the truth. It was below standard. Every single time Teddy Thomas got through, they scored a try. And it was poor. So, to me, if you keep doing the same thing against the same opposition and they keep picking it and you don't change, that's the coach's fault. And I think the coaches have to really look at what they're doing with Conor Murray, they're standing all their players up to show one line of defence. So they're putting 14 guys in the line, one guy behind. Now, that has not worked for them in their 22. As soon as someone puts a little kick through or there's a chip over the top or even an offload, it's a try. So they're putting all their eggs in that one basket. And teams that are adventurous, like Racing, it's just not effective against. So if it was me, I'd change it up. And Leinster know exactly that same thing. Short kicking games against Munster rip them apart. So they've got to do something, especially in their own 22, where they've got more than one player behind that front line. Now, some people say, oh, that's old school, it's all that. And I don't buy any of that. I think that's crap. You've got to do what's effective. You know, I don't care if it's from 20 years ago or 20 years in the future. What's effective? And right now, Munster's defence in their own half is not effective once teams get behind them. And that falls at Coach Van Graan's feet because he's got to make those decisions on who's going to do that change to their structure. Just as it would to Larkham, the change to their offensive structure, they've got to change their defensive structure.
Can we come out and take a bigger look at where Irish rugby is and the importance of this rivalry? It really feels like, if we look historically, the brilliant Munster team set the standard for Irish rugby, and Leinster eventually caught up to them, and obviously have passed them out now. For Irish rugby to reach the absolute peak that it could reach, and we always talk about a World Cup quarter-final being as far as we've ever got, we actually really need Munster to be as good as they were when they were capable of winning Heineken Cups, and we need them to be able to beat Leinster. In some ways, the best result for Irish rugby might be a brilliant performance from Leinster, but one that's even better from Munster this weekend, where they do beat them and this rivalry explodes into the next level. Because it's not a rivalry if one team always wins.
Yeah, you're right, Joe. You're right, Joe. Like it is a rivalry because you got to understand that even when I was there 20 years ago, we played Munster 5 times in my time there, and we only lost once. When I was up at Ulster, we played Munster 4 times and we lost once. So, this concept that Munster team, who were winning European Cups, were always dominating Irish rugby, doesn't really hold water. And that hatred that Munster had of being beaten, if you speak to Ron O'Gara back to 20 years ago, the first Celtic League, he said that drove so much of that determination they were never going to feel that again. Where what it did to Leinster, it gave Leinster the ability to say, hey, look, these are European champions. We can take these guys on. And same thing with Ulster when that they went on to make a European Cup. So the European Cup final, they got walloped in it. But in front of all that, even though Leinster and Ulster were behind Munster and they weren't seen as being equal to them, that drove Munster on. Now, the same thing is happening to Leinster. Even though Munster and Ulster and the other provinces are seen to be behind them, that's still driving them on. And Munster keeps stepping up, and Ulster stepped up, and Connacht stepped up. Connacht won a competition a few years ago, and that's driven Leinster to step up again. The amazing thing about what it's done to Leinster is the creation of an academy system and a process where Leinster are winning Europe with 20 of their 23 coming from their academy system. That's been the biggest catalyst. Now, that is great for Irish rugby because if you look at Munster, there's 2 or 3 Leinster guys in it. You look up north in Ulster, there's 3 or 4 Leinster guys in it. You go over in Galway, the same sort of thing. So what the other provinces have got to do now, so what have we got to do? We've got to come back to our school system. We've got to put into our schools. We've got to drive our academies because that's what Leinster are doing. And if we can start getting to the point where each of the provinces has 20 homegrown boys in their 23, that's been a huge step forward. So what does that mean to the national coach? The national coach has got all these guys that can step forward. So you don't have to be beaten to still drive the competition within the country. And it's very interesting talking to the Munster guys of my generation who were opposition. And even though there was rivalry and, bordered on fanaticism and obsession, and we said things and did things we probably all regret, now that's turned to respect and friendship. And we talk about what it was and what that drove and how it did. And it's a really nice conversation, but one that's still valid today. because when these guys retire, when Sexton retires and let's say Peter O'Mahony retires, it'd be really interesting for them when they can speak honestly about what it does. Because you can't really speak honestly. The players, current players, can't speak honestly about what that rivalry really is. And a lot of the times I hear the boys from the past speaking and I'm going, you're just putting a bit of sugar on top of that because you really hated us and we really hated you and we said things that were bad and you did things that were bad. Like that. But it was great. It wasn't over the top. It, occasionally got a little bit out of hand, but it just drove performance. It drove training, and it created, it should have created more Six Nation Championships wins. It won some Triple Crowns, but certainly it put together the last couple. And then when you had a great coach like Joe Schmidt at the top, it pushes it on. So whoops, my camera just slipped off. Sorry. I think it's a really healthy thing, mate. And I look, if Leinster keep winning and they keep getting pushed forward, that's life. That's life. Munster have got to step up and do it. And the beauty of that is they can't talk your way into it. You've got to act it. Munster can't say, oh, Ron O'Gara's era and Paul O'Connell's era. They were brilliant. They were. What's this era going to do? What have they got to do? So they've got to find 5%, 3%, just that little bit more for another 80 minutes, and that'll drive it on again. If they can't, then Leinster keep going forward, and that's a healthy thing also.
It sounds like you're predicting a Leinster win in a close game. Is that fair enough?
I think that's a fair summation, Jib, because I haven't got any evidence to go against it. So I try, I've got a lot of affection for Leinster, and I as I said before, Leo's a friend of mine. But if I didn't think they could win, and which I said in last year's European Cup final against Saracens, I said, well, I think Saracens will win. I'd say it. I think it's going to be a very close game again, but I think the depth that Leinster have, players coming back, and winning's a habit. Winning is just as much a habit as losing. I think they'll take it on, and I think they'll get through this week. But it will be close. And if Munster got up and won, I wouldn't be surprised because they're improving and they'll continue to improve this year. As long as they get their defence right in their own half, that'll be the key.
Matt Williams, good stuff. Great to talk to you. Thanks a million.
Love to talk to you guys. Keep safe.